morning. Okay, that's spiked like hell on mine. Anyways, thanks everyone. Thank you, Steve. Welcome everyone to Where Do We Go From Here? Another episode where we talk about what we're doing with our lives and trying to figure it out as we go. Today, I just kind of want to talk a little bit about. I'm moving soon, and I've been working on getting that set up. And I figured I'd tell you. I was excited to tell you about my apartment and shit that I'm looking to move into in Seattle. But first, Steve, how you doing today, man?
Feeling a little under the weather.
You picked up a sick from a coworker, is what you're telling me?
I think so. Yeah.
Is it all like nasally, like up here?
It is now. It started in the chestal region, and then moved to up here. Not a fan.
Not a fan. I wouldn't blame you. I gotta tell you, I have been dealing with a lot less since I've moved to Texas. I've been dealing with a lot less issues of like getting sick or getting uncomfortable or allergies or things like that. It's been, I mean, we've got cedars out here, which are brutal right now. It's like the pollination season. So that really gums it all up. But otherwise, it's not so bad. It's not so bad. Do you like my background here?
What
the
is
wood.
That?
It's an old hollow door.
Oh.
Just an old door.
It's an old door, just hanging out.
Just two doors.
Just two doors.
Two doors. Well, it's
Two
plywood
doors.
in a door. Two woods.
Just one door.
So just one door. So
you're moving to Seattle.
man, dude, I'm moving to Seattle.
And you're really excited.
in-
Tell me about your apartment. You were excited.
Apartment-
offline about your apartment.
So in when I was living in downtown Des Moines, my apartment was 700, just under 670, 680 square feet, and it was about 1,500 total a month, with a little bit over for utilities, depending on how bad it was, like weather-wise. And
now you're
one
paying
bed, one bath.
twice as much in
Now I'm-
Seattle.
Actually, what's crazy is the apartment I'm looking at, and I have a tour set up for when I go out to visit in second week of February. The apartment, the rate for a 530 square foot unit that I want is $1,700 a month, just under $1,700 a month, not including utilities or anything. I'm still waiting to hear back on that. But it's 200 square feet less, and it's $200 more, but in
That's
like the
great.
heart of the neighborhood I want to be in Seattle. Like that's.
Ah.
I feel like that's a reasonable trade-off. I don't feel like that's too bad cost-wise.
Mm.
I feel pretty good about it. I like it. But
Well, good,
I'm
good.
super stoked. So it's gonna be a studio. You're gonna come in and it's like got the door opens. It's just a wall straight down the line, and then with the washroom, I have a wall for my like bike.
Toilet
I'm gonna
next
try to
the
get like
bed, that sort of thing.
the bed
Rails.
is the toilet. It's a two for one. It's
Cut
got
a hole
the
through
bedpan
it,
under
yeah.
it, and then you just have a little thing you pull down, and
Right.
whoosh, away it goes.
And it could be a shower as well. So there you go. Three in one.
you poop, shower, and sleep all at once. In fact, you run the risk of waterboarding yourself, but it's
That's
not.
a studio apartment for
that's
you.
it's
Yeah.
it's the risk you run. But no, I'm pretty stoked about it. It's gonna be it's right in the middle of the neighborhood I want to live in West Seattle, which is pretty nice. And it's going to have I'm gonna have parking. I'm gonna have paid parking in
Whoa.
a garage, which I tell you what,
That's
tell
probably
you what,
expensive, I'm sure.
but I think I'm gonna pay. I'm willing to pay for that. I think
I bet.
because I don't want to park on the street. I don't want to risk any of
Yeah.
that kind of crap or deal with any of that. But no, I've got like a whole plan for what the apartment's gonna look like and where I'm gonna put all my crap. And I'm super stoked. I've been thinking. So talking about like, so one of the genesis for this whole podcast project, which we're still figuring it out. We're still fleshing out how this feels, and it's just
Thus the
it's primarily hence the title.
Yeah.
It's conversational, and one of the things that when we talked at work and stuff, one of the things that we kind of felt was like, while work was like seasonally satisfying, right? Seasonally fulfilling.
Sure.
We both had. I'll say that for myself. I know how you feel about just work in general, but
Well, working for somebody else in general, but
yeah, working for nothing against our current employer necessarily. It's just the nature.
No,
of
it's a
like,
great job.
I'm so sorry. I've got so many thoughts. I'm just gonna run them down at you here real quick. But I want to talk about that actually a little bit about the current gig and just the nature of like the ebbs and flows of quality, the ebbs and flows in quality of the jobs in the world of software. 'Cause, right, it's pretty
Mm.
common to jump from job to job every couple of years, right? 2 years tends to be the colloquial or the common jumping off point for a lot of people to change
Yeah.
something about their employment when you work in the
Nowadays
world
it
of
is.
software.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nowadays, not historically, but just with the nature of compensation packages and raises and all that
Hmm.
kind of stuff, it makes just the nature of everything. It makes more sense to rotate every couple of years.
Yeah.
Um, I had coffee this morning with a friend of a friend. One of my old roommate. He has a buddy who lives here in Austin. He's actually from the same hometown, same town I'm in here. He grew up here, and we had coffee. But one of the things we talked about was like I feel like my current job, the one I'm working on right now, because of the nature of the freedom that I have to just work and do what I need to do,
Hmm.
to help the team do what we need to do to get shit done. Just along with all the other context, it's like it's kind of the magnum opus of my career so far, and and like it's not necessarily some big lofty job at like I'm not spearheading a department at Amazon or some video game studio or Facebook or whatever massive tech
Yeah.
company,
Yeah.
right? But I'm realizing for myself, that part doesn't matter. What's really cool is the work I'm doing is interesting.
Hmm.
The people I'm working with are awesome. It's probably the best team I've had for a long time, if through my entire career,
Yeah.
and the agency that I have, right? Like
Yeah.
I have
Work-life
oversight,
balance
but I
is
also
good too.
oh, and the work. Oh my god! After the place that shall not be named,
Yeah.
uh, that was a nightmare. That was
Yeah.
sucking everything out of me. And then this was like, I get to come in, I do the amount of work. Some weeks I work 80 hours. Some week I work, not 80, sorry. Some weeks I work like 40 to 50 hours. Some weeks I work like less than that. Generally speaking, I should probably be clear. I work my full 40 hours. I get my job done.
I think
All
it's
those
probably
things,
more of
blah,
like
blah, blah.
day-to-day basis rather than, I
But
mean,
yeah, day to
week to
day, I
week.
don't have to. If I get my stuff done, I get my stuff done. And
Yeah.
then I work ahead. I try to do all these things, but there's not that stress of like I have to be at my desk. I have to be logged on and tuned in, which makes
Hmm.
it easier in its own right to be logged on and to be tuned in.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't have the pressure to do it, it's easier to do it. I don't know if that makes any
Yeah.
sense or not.
And when you are, it's a bit more focused, and important when it's on your terms. I mean, it's one of the main reasons why I would hope to one day work more for myself is because I
Hmm.
get to decide when to be more focused and when not to be. And then when I am more focused, I'm way more focused and the quality of work is way higher than when
Yeah.
I'm being forced to sit at a desk and exist, just be there. I'm not going to put in good work.
I 100% agree. And I've been thinking a lot about when I was talking with Ross, I was talking a bit about like, so this is like, this is it. This project has all these, the circumstances are set and I'm running and doing some really cool stuff. Is is there going to be anything in this industry that's going to measure up, or maybe it's time, not necessarily, I'm not talking about like leaving my current job, but like once I've like we're and you obviously we're working together, and I try my best to be transparent. But like we're working on some pretty big stuff for our stakeholders,
Yeah.
and that they've been asking for a long time. And like when that's done in 1, 2, 3, or 4 years, um, maybe I just go do something else, right? Like maybe this is it. I don't know. I've just been thinking about that a
Mhm.
lot lately, where it's like instead of aiming to find, I think one of the things for me that's been healthy and trying, and or maybe not healthy, but I've been trying to work through is like one of the things I struggle with is see, am I, when I look at and inspect my place at my job and the work that I do, am I seeking to find the one thing that's going to be static and I'm just going to do that forever and that's just it, that's my career, and I'm
Mhm.
just like bouncing around until I find that, or do I think about it more? I've been wondering if it will be more healthy for me long term and more successful for me long term, maybe. And I'm not trying to put any caveat, not putting any pressure. Like I've got to figure out and answer this question. It's just it's like a thought, right?
Yeah.
It's a thought experiment. I don't have them very often, thoughts that is, but got this one. I'm trying to hold on to it, and which is tough. But anyways, so like, or is it more like accomplish goals at places, and then say like, all right, I'm going to try to get this done. I'm going to try to tackle this thing, and don't
Yeah.
set an expectation of like moving on from wherever you're at or not moving on or whatever. But just for me, setting, I'm going to try to get this done, and then see where I'm at. and not be too stuck in on I have to do this for the rest of my life, because I'm realizing my skill sets apply to a lot of different industries,
Yeah.
and I know that there's things that I want to do in like stuff that I'm passionate about. Not
Hmm.
that I'm not that I don't care about my current job, but I'm much more passionate about like art, sport, and food,
Yeah.
and those are things that I've interacted with some in professional or semi-professional contexts that I would love to explore sometime in the future. And maybe once I've finished I'm like, all right, man, this is it. I've knocked it out with this thing, and
Yeah.
let's go try something else. I've been thinking a lot about that lately.
Yeah. I mean, there's two thoughts that come to mind immediately. One is that I don't know that this is your perception, but I don't think it's going to be the case that when those big things are out of the way that there's going to be nothing behind that. I think.
No, no, there will always be
Yeah, yeah.
something new.
Well, especially when I'm working there, I'll always be able to find something,
You
that
motherfucker. God,
that
every week it's like, Steve, hey Tex, I got this thing. Hey Tex, I'm kidding.
yeah.
I love it, Steve.
How
I'm being
dare I
ridiculous.
try to improve our work and quality life and all that. There's always stuff like that, and then
I,
there's always
I
the
want you to
case
know
that
I do value it. I'm not trying to be a dick about it. I'm just
yeah,
having
no,
fun.
I
It's
figured
it's
you're
it's a
joking.
change of pace compared to the place that shall not be named, where like they would just be like, you'd be like, hey, can I do this? No, you have to go do it and ask for forgiveness, and then we
Yeah,
won't ever give you credit.
and there's a person that worked there that I don't know that we've talked about or not. We can talk about him
Mhm.
offline. Really nice guy. But I remember having a conversation with him. May or may not have involved alcohol, but I was like, there's always improvement that can be done. There's always
Mhm.
efficiencies to be made. He's like, no, you think so? And I was like, yeah. And we had this argument. I was like, there's always,
You can always do more. It's not necessarily a question of if you can or can't, but it's like, is it
right.
in the grand scheme, and when you put the whole picture together and consider the relevant things for you in the context of whatever the scenario, situation, circumstance
Yep.
is it worth making those changes? Does it bring enough value for you? Is it like, all
Right.
those things? It's not that things aren't perfection doesn't exist, obviously, right? There's never
Yeah. And I
not something you could do.
and even as something as simple as you say, okay, well, there's this process. How do we make it faster? Well, there you take away obvious, pointless steps, and you make it faster that way. And then
Mhm.
another very obvious thing you could do is just have a faster computer run the same process, and then it gets a little fast. There's something
I
even at
mean,
that level that
yeah,
can make
it's
it go
all part of
faster.
the
So,
discussion.
the second thought I had was, um, I I I remember reading a book. I won't mention the book because I read somewhere later that the book was a little bit fraudulent, or
Mhm.
I don't know. I can't remember
Did we
the
talk? I feel like we might have talked about a book kind of like this, where it was like, "Oh, this seems
potentially, yeah,
interesting," and then it
yeah.
was not legit at all in the
But one
long
of the
run.
things he mentioned, I'll have to look up whether this is true or not, but it makes sense. It was that 3M, at least their engineering department, every few years, um, they would switch things up a bit. And
Hmm.
so if you worked, because 3M does a lot of stuff. I don't know if you're aware of
Oh
that.
yeah, I have
Um,
a friend who worked at 3M for a while.
yeah, so they take somebody that was maybe working for the glue department or the adhesive tape department, and
It's
then
funny.
they'd go work. I mean, that's literally, yeah. It's like,
That's
um,
literally what they do.
and then they'd go work for like the light bulb department or something like
Hmm.
that. And the story goes, the rationale is that there's something about mixing things up that
Yep.
spurs creativity. And we've talked before about, I can't remember if it's X Prize. There's some prize where somebody funds the a contest with a lot of money, and they
Oh,
say
yep,
figure
yep,
out
yep,
this
yep.
this problem that's been plaguing science for a while, and the people that have some of the most interesting solutions aren't always the people that are in those
Mhm.
specific fields. So if it's like a physics question or
Yeah.
problem, maybe a biologist comes up with something by virtue of the fact that they don't see everything in this blinders fashion of just kind of like, this is the only scope I see. So there is something to be said about, I think with you specifically, knowing what I know about you, knowing that you again are into art and you're into being creative and learning and growing, there's probably something. I think you're probably going to be wanting to move around at a
Yeah.
decent pace, and obviously you're moving geographically, and that's going to be one change. But
Mhm.
my suspicion is you're probably going to want to move on to something, not again that you don't like the job, because it's a great job, but
No.
just for
But yeah.
your personal fulfillment, you're going to want to do something else. And because we mentioned Anthony Bourdain before and how much you like him,
Hmm.
I it seems to me like, and I know I'm speaking for you in this case, but if
Speak for me all day, Steve.
if you had, I feel like if you had some sort of experience or gig that was similar to like be able to travel and cook
Oh
and eat
yeah.
different foods, and like to be
Mhm.
able to have that be your job would be fantastic, because you would
Oh my
get
God.
the combination of having the work, having it be your career, but also the freedom to be able to like go wherever you want and really
Yeah.
truly explore, but actually make money
So
off it too.
I've been thinking a lot about
So go
that,
do it.
and I think we're both in a similar mindset of like where the agency is really important to both of us
Yeah.
about what we do with ourselves. Um, and one of my big goals, I think, for when I move out to Seattle is I kind of, so I've done some Twitch streaming. I'm a gamer. I do some Twitch stream. I got the sub button because I got the like 50 followers and the consecutive days with like some number of streamers. It's hard, but not that hard to do. And I have done I spent a lot of my time in the last 3 years. My hobby space has been esports, amateur esports. And
Mm.
so when I when I would do like what I run teams, I run an organization, I actually helped run tournaments, and when my teams would play or otherwise, I would stream those games. I would do shoutcasting and stuff like that, which I learned a lot about from doing that. Color commentary, shoutcasting, all that stuff. And in that process, I would do Twitch streaming, and I found it was a lot of fun. And I've kind of thought about like, because I've been considering, what do I? It's been finding leveraging things like that, like Discord communities, Twitch communities, and things like that as a way to like reach out and practice a skill or learn something new in a
Mm-hmm.
kind of a low consequence environment. Right. I've
Yeah.
been considering like maybe I just take my Twitch channel and I just do set up in my Seattle apartment and do like food streams a couple times a week where I just cook.
Yeah.
And then
Mm-hmm.
and one of the things that I don't know if you get this ever, but one of the things that I struggle with when I think about stuff, especially when I think about a possible career, and I'll give you a little bit of text backstory, a little text lore here. I used to work in food service, but when I think about a career in food service, in some, because I worked in the kitchen and I was manager of the front of house, the service staff. But being manager, we would spend a lot of time helping the kitchen do prep work when there was call-ins or overload on ticket orders and stuff like that, or just
Mm.
whatever, right? We would help do dishes, we would help do line work. We wouldn't do line cooking, but we would do prep work and we would do dish dealing and stuff like that, right? Not dish dealing,
Sure.
dishwashing. The stuff that doesn't take like a chef, but just anyone that can
Yeah.
hold a sponge or a knife can do.
Yeah.
But doing that, I would get a little bit more involved here and there in other elements, and that was so much fun. But also just being in that environment was one of the most satisfying jobs I've ever had. I loved it so much, and I got to earn a lot of the respect of my team, and it was just that whole
Yeah.
environment and the things that people like Anthony Bourdain or David Chang. Or Marco Pure White or Gordon Ramsay or a million other people that work as chefs and run their own restaurants and have built a career like this talk about is that pirate crew and the camaraderie and that experience that's just really
Yeah.
special. And it's similar to sports and athletics when you're on a sports team,
Yeah.
whether it's in high
In the
school or
military too.
professional. Oh yeah, it's similar
It's huge.
similar connectivity that you form that's really exciting and
Yeah.
inspiring. And I really miss that to a degree, and I kind of want to explore
Yeah.
that. And specifically, now that's the positive side of this. The flip side of the coin, I am driven by a deep level of spite. When I was my second summer at this job, my second and final summer in college working for this job, I asked the head, the boss, Joey. I won't say his last name or anything. Not that it really matters too much. He's a good guy. Good guy. Did the best he
No,
could.
that's too
I,
obvious. We'll go with Jay Simpson.
we'll go
It's a
with
Simpsons joke. Anyway.
Oh, let's call him Jay Simpson. But Joey was. I asked him like, can I transition to working in the kitchen? I'd really like to explore this. And he kind of like looked at me, and I just remember he said, "You don't even know how to make a roux. What are you gonna do in the kitchen? No, get out of here. Go back to your shift or whatever." And I went on my
Yeah.
next set of days off. I went with some friends, and I made a roux. A roux is just melted butter and flour, really. It's really difficult and really easy to mess it up. And I did. It was terrible. It was one of the worst things I've ever made in my life. But I made it. I tried it. In that spite of like, man,
Yeah.
what kind of not has stuck with me and influenced me to a degree. And one of the things that's influenced me in a way is like, and I kind of hit like last time we were talking, we talked about those aha moments in life where you kind of like
Yeah.
almost like level yourself up or like kind of move past a barrier and like kind of break something down in your own like in your own baggage or trauma or whatever it is. I kind of, and I'm not calling
Yeah.
this trauma, but just like baggage, right? Like I kind of broke through something recently because one of the things that I've been carrying with me since that experience is qualifications, the importance of qualifications and having that I can make a roux or I'm a chef or I'm trained or I went to school or I did this, that, and the other. It's like
Yeah.
the qualifications. I'm like, man, the way that legitimizes people and I get hung up on the fact that I feel like I shouldn't go explore or go dive into um, this career, whether it's in food or anything else, because I don't have any qualifications. I didn't go to culinary school. I don't have culinary school experience. And if I want to do this, I need to look at going in like culinary school, and that's expensive and that's difficult and that's blah 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 blah. And then I was like, this is gonna sound really dumb, but I was like, wait a second, how did I get where I am now when I have a degree in biology
Yeah.
and I've
Yeah.
never touched. I wrote Hello World and Visual Basic in Java before I really started my career. I didn't know what an
Yeah.
API was on day one in 2018. I learned on day two, and then
Yeah.
I learned it really on like day 20. But and I was like,
Yeah.
oh shit. And then nowhere along the way now I've run into some challenges where people highlight like, hey, you don't have a lot of experience or you don't have a lot of qualifications, like you don't have a lot of
Yeah.
certificates, this, that, and the other. And that's all fair, right? That's reasonable. Most people have a million certificates, CSPO, CSM,
Doesn't
CS
make 'em
whatever,
good.
right? It doesn't make you good. And it's like
Just means that you spent the 20 hours or whatever for a class and you paid the money. That's
I
all it
have
means.
worked in ag, manufacturing, insurance, and finance, and all these things, and all these different fields. And I have succeeded, and I have failed terribly. And more than anything else, like I have never had my GPA matter. I've never had the fact that I have a bachelor's matter. I've never had the fact that I have or don't have a certification in Scrum. I did have a CSPO for a while, but I've never re-upped it. But like I've never had none of that has really mattered. What's really gotten me where I am is my ability to communicate my skills and my strengths and my experience and the value those things have taught me, and then like leverage that practically when people do hire
Yeah.
me, when they do take the chance on me. I try and I communicate clearly and all these things, and it's like okay, so now that well, I was thought about that, and I started thinking about some of these other goals in my life that I want to start to drive towards in the next many years. I was like, okay, so how do I start getting the experience, not the
Yeah.
qualifications, not the outcome, but how do I take steps and be present in those steps to learn from them? And I was kind of thinking like this Twitch streaming thing. If I was to do that, that could be a fun way to just like, with no intention of actually getting any real viewership, but just having like there's because working in the kitchen. I'm so sorry, I'm going on at length. I'll get this last thought out. But there's this when I was working in the kitchen, when I was working uh, front of house and helping in the back house and stuff, it was a performance because there's other people watching you and it's a high stress, high intensity situation. And everyone, directly or indirectly, is paying attention to what you're doing. And if you're fucking up, that gets noticed, right? And
Yeah.
it's not necessarily a bad thing. You're gonna mess up. It's inevitable. You're always gonna mess up, and it's just how you learn. Are you consistently whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like if I'm putting myself on a screen and watch and know that I'm trying to like perform for this Twitch thing, that could be a way to, while working my other stuff, start to build myself some comfort with just those fundamentals, right? Along with what I'm making on there being because I'm also, dude, I am reading so much literature. I'm trying to consume what I can, but I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to identify those barriers basically to me doing this thing, and then trying to figure out how can I tear that barrier down. Right. The first one was qualifications, and the next one I'm still kind of figuring out. It's like how do I get
Hmm.
experience, and then how do I not feel like an absolute idiot while doing that? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I'd be curious. I don't know if there's an easy way to find this out, but I feel like I feel like it's probably more common than not that people get to where they are at a certain point in their life or career or whatever skill level, and it's not, it's tangential to where they started. I mean, I can
Mm-hmm.
list off at least a few examples. I mean, I know, who was it? Bill Gates, despite what you might think of him, he, dropped out of college, and he is where he is today. If you want to use
Right.
that as a quality metric. Oh, I used to work with a guy at my first job, which is an education company, and he was a I don't know if I can get the title right, but basically like kind of a project manager where he would
Mm-hmm.
run different sites, remote sites, where they would kind of like do pop up. They do like a pop up center for training people to to score tests locally in those areas.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe he got a degree in Spanish, and
Oh
then worked at
shit! Really?
Walmart for a while, and he sold like water valves or something like that,
Oh
and
damn.
then end up, project manager,
Mm-hmm.
and it one of my favorites is, Bruce Lee got to where he was not out of out of any specific qualifications, um and his approach was, in some cases he would kind of just go to a certain martial art that he wanted to learn, or saw somebody that was really good, and he would go to a school and um, go to like the second or third.
Whoa. Okay. He would go to a school. I think I lost you there.
Oh yeah,
Um, it's my
I don't think you
internet.
lost much.
Okay. He
Yeah, you
would go
dropped
to a
out
school.
a
So he would
little bit
go
too.
observe something. He would go to a school,
So he'd go
and
to a
then
school and he would kind of he'd basically ha- you still there?
oh my goodness, what is happening here? I apologize, everybody. Hey,
Back.
how's it going there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Okay.
I lost the
Well, I'll
video
do
too.
some editing.
I'm still recording sound.
Yeah. So he would go to a school.
Yeah, so he would go to a school, and I can't remember if he actually challenged people. I know that he would look for like the second or third like highest ranked student or whatever, and he'd offer to kind of like exchange skills. So basically,
Hmm.
he had accumulated a lot of different techniques and skills with either just like training or like specific moves, and so he would either want to learn from them directly, or as he progressed in a lot of cases he would offer to do these exchanges. So it was a way for him to not get like officially certified in some of those things. And what was great about that is, he was probably able to pretty quickly distill some of the maybe more some of the better distillations of whatever those styles are. So in a lot of
Without
cases,
he would be able to
without
like
actually
drive right to the heart of it, right? Like he'd be getting
exactly
in there
right,
and like he
rather
would be
than
learning
spend
what
right
they
instead of
are
spending
know
3
now instead of
years
spending all this time developing
exactly
nonsense, like not nonsense, but yeah.
right. And
It's like
so
why learn to punch like this when you're really gonna punch like a certain I don't know. I'm not a martial artist, so I don't
right.
necessarily know. But I think I'm following what you're saying. Sorry to interrupt. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Well, and there's a very similar thing you can do where people talk about finding mentors and all that,
Hmm.
and it's a lot of the same thing. I feel like it's a lot of you don't have to, like we just mentioned, your qualifications don't necessarily mean anything. We used to work with a guy, or I used to work with a guy at the company that shall not be named, that was in his 50s maybe at the time, maybe even 60s, Actually, a couple guys, and they probably had pretty decent, pretty lengthy resumes, but they were not good. Like they were
They
not
were
good at
bad.
their job.
Oh my goodness. Have we
And
talked about
so, yeah,
self-help books yet?
I don't think so.
Because I got so many thoughts about that. Maybe we could just dedicate a whole episode to talking
Yeah.
about the world of self-help and then professional. What would you call something like the Phoenix Project? Do you know what the Phoenix Project is? Have you heard of that?
You're not on the video, by the way.
That's fine. It's recording on my machine. We'll
Okay.
as long as you can hear me and my audio is recording, we're gonna keep on moving. I'm gonna
Yeah.
put a blurb at the end of the episode talking about, hey guys, I live in the woods and I'm still figuring out my setup, but it's fine.
Anyway, the Phoenix Project.
But anyways, the Phoenix Project. I'm gonna send you a link to it. I'm gonna put a
Okay.
pin in that, and I'm gonna put a note in our Discord that I want to talk about that stuff and the dynamic between those things because I have so many thoughts. But one of the things that I struggle with is like, there's so many professionals that I work with in my role. What
Yeah.
they do is they read all this other shit, right? And they read shit that is written. It is stuff that is meant to be able to tell you do this, like this is how you should do things or whatever. I
Yeah.
don't know. I have a lot of thoughts on it, but it's this weird thing of like, well, you're reading what everyone, and this is maybe I'm a hypocrite. I don't know. I am a hypocrite in so many things, but maybe this is something I'm hypocritical about because I'm like, you're reading all this stuff, but where in there are you actually like learning from your own experience and applying and
Yeah.
changing based on your own experience? Because I gotta tell you, I've read a little bit of like industry literature, but in my role, it's kind of frontier in a frontier space, and I say
Right.
that in that project management in white collar jobs is in a weird growing phase away from post World War II manufacturing style accountant style management into coaching and more of a like a soft skills technical communicator stuff. And they're two totally different domains, but it's people that are trained in the former trying to learn the latter. Uh, and it's this I see basically when someone is like, I have a CSPO or a CSM and I've read all these books and I've read the core literature of the industry. For me, like the Phoenix Project or Atomic Habits or whatever, nothing against those books, but it's just like there's a
Mhm.
correlation for me where it's like when I hear someone who's read all that stuff and has all those qualifications or whatever, I don't want to hear, instinctually do not want to hear a damn thing they have to say. Not even a little bit. Because it is
Right.
so stuck in exactly how things, it's all backwards looking, right? It's all, and it's not even on their own experience. It's all like, it's stuck here. It's not trying new things. It's not trying to push things and simplify things and get to the understanding and the core of what the job is. They've got all these paradigms and all these things, and they're going to talk about story points and velocities and resource management. And it's because so much of the literature out there is how can we, as people who have been trained in the former and grew up in the former, marry that with agile, marry that with
Yeah.
technical communication responsibilities, and you have to let go, right? You have to
Yeah.
let go of that historic stuff and start totally fresh. And one of the things that I feel very strongly about my personal success in my job is that I came in with no experience. I had no industry knowledge. I didn't read a damn book. I learned what agile was fundamentally,
Yeah.
and then I learned from my mentors. Like I learned from the people that were doing the work, and I sat
Yeah.
there and it's one of the things that is really important as a technical communicator and project manager, product owner. I need to sit in with the engineers and learn how you guys work and learn like what you're doing and understand what you're doing day to day and what the tech stack looks like. I don't need to go and read a million books. And at the same time, that's the reason I say I'm a hypocrite about that because I advocate reading. I think it's really I have learned so much about myself in life, and my outlook on life evolves when I read, when I consume literature. And I'm talking not just like this professional business literature. I'm talking about I'm reading Don Quixote right now, and I'm reading the forward, and I'm it's fascinating. It's incredible. It's really interesting stuff. I've been reading a lot of Ursula Le Guin. I'm reading Anne Leckie, which are both feminine sci-fi authors or feminist sci-fi authors that have done incredible work exploring the concept of self uh, outside of and within like standard gender norms and kind of breaking some of that stuff down in the context of science fiction, discussing this stuff since the 60s, right? Like
Mhm.
Ursula Le Guin was writing this in the 60s and 70s and 80s,
Yeah.
and it's so relevant and so interesting and so poignant. But it's like some stuff I learned there teaches me how to do my job better. as opposed to
Right.
going and reading what someone else is trying to do. I don't know. This is where the hypocrisy comes in, but there's this correlation where someone who's just so deep into the lore and the zeitgeist as it is today, I kind of hesitate to listen to what they have to say because they're
Yeah.
not forward thinking. They're just stuck, or not even necessarily stuck here. They're like looking anywhere but themselves. I don't know how to describe, but it's very. I know it's hypocritical of me, but it's weird.
I don't think it's hypocritical. I think there's I think it's maybe you don't have the right language to put it in the right terms.
Mhm.
I don't think it's hypocritical. There's something that I listened to a while back about prescriptive versus subscriptive or something like that.
Ooh, I like those.
Um,
Those are interesting words.
there's also something,
I don't know what
you know, you hear a
subscriptive
lot
means.
about goals versus habits, you know, where
Mhm.
it's like I want to um, lose 10 pounds. Well, it's better if you are in a habitual state where you're, you know, eating the right things and you're working out and all that. That's better for you than just to say I'm gonna lose 10 pounds, because you could lose a leg and that's losing 10 pounds. You know, or
Oh,
probably
dude,
more than
you're.
that.
I was literally about to
Um,
go on a whole tangent, but you cut my 15
yeah,
15-minute tangent off by just saying like that right there. Yeah, you
I'm
could lose
good
10
at
pounds,
that.
cut off a leg, get out of here.
Yeah. Well, and it's
um,
yeah.
Speaking
There's
of which,
something.
I
Are you
weighed in
gonna
at
cut your leg
250
off?
today. I'm not gonna cut a leg off. I actually
Oh,
I lost 30
that's too
pounds in
bad.
the last 9 months, man.
30
Feeling
pounds, nice,
pretty good, pretty
good
good.
work.
But anyways, so you're
Yeah.
talking about there's losing habits and rhythms. You're talking about.
Yeah, and so it's funny when you hear people that are like, "Oh, I've heard this new method for, you know, there's a new diet, there's a new way to be organized in your life, there's a new
Mhm.
way this and that," and it's just like, for one
Oh,
thing,
dude, you're hitting. Man, this is such. That's
for
one of the things I have issues with self-help books, where it's like, I don't have an issue with this guy, was it William Demings or Edward Demings or something, who wrote about like manufacturing practices and the like the business philosophy around organizing and around organizing manufacturing. And I was talking to my buddy Ross today about this, and I need to go read this guy's book. But one of the things that Ross was kind of mentioning is this guy's approach was not necessarily telling anyone what to do, but just contemplating and tearing apart his own ideas he sees,
Mhm.
practices he's seen, ideas he has for how to adapt, all these things, right? It's not necessarily saying do this thing, here's a strategy or whatever. It's just tearing stuff apart from what I understood. Whereas like stuff like Atomic Habits or whatever, and a lot of and a lot of other less successful self help books. And again, I say this having never read any of this shit, so like don't listen to anything I have to say. But like,
Yeah,
it's these things tell you what to do,
it's
and
like
there's value there, but there's something like
yeah, but there
practice
is
the
and there's
mindfulness
not.
for yourself, right? Like,
Yeah,
no one's going to be able to tell you how you are going to be able to live a healthier life.
it's
People
like
can help guide you and influence you, but you have to figure it out for yourself.
right. Excuse me. And then there's yeah, I'll bring it back to Bruce Lee like I love to do. You know,
I got
his
Berdane, you got Bruce Lee. It's fine.
yeah. Oh well, and I'll bring up the guy we were talking about before, Mr. Beast. You know, one of the things that is a kind of a theme for people that are maybe particularly good in a certain area is it's like I'm I'm really good at this, but if you follow this goes back to like the prescriptive thing. It's like if you follow this recipe or this prescription that I
Mhm.
followed, that doesn't guarantee your success. You know, there's a lot of factors that go into that person being successful.
One of the
Some of which is just the pure luck of
yeah.
being born when they were born, certain opportunities that just so happen to
Aw, man.
happen in their life. You know, so it becomes better. So this is, I think, what you're speaking to. It sometimes becomes better if you just tell a story, and
Yeah.
say, you know, leave it up to the person listening. There's something I saw recently, either heard or listened to, whatever, doesn't matter. Somebody was talking about, it was either poetry or music, and basically it's like all these people are thinking a song, for example. Oh, it means this. It's about the guy's triumph over his drug use in his life, whatever. And you
Mhm.
see a lot of people speculate in comments under a video of, oh, it was written because of this, whatever. And then you either hear you either hear that that's true, or you hear that it's not, that they just happen to write it because they, saw something on the news or whatever. But one thing that stuck with me is somebody said something like, I think it was the actual artist was saying something like, I wrote it because I was feeling a certain way, and it wasn't necessarily about anything specific, but it was because they were feeling a certain way. And what they like about the ambiguity of it is that it means something different to different people. And so
Yes.
people can listen to stuff and view different things. And for one person, it might mean overcoming drug problems. For another person, it's, I heard this song all the time in the car as a kid and it reminds me of my dad, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think that cuts to, what we were kind of talking about it is that, what does it take for you to be a Michael Jordan? It doesn't take you doing the same things that Michael Jordan did. It takes doing what works for you.
Yeah.
And the reading part of things, you can glean certain things. And I feel like what's maybe better for people are the things that are maybe stories, or just telling somebody a story about something that happened sometimes can provide so much more richness to the people listening, because you can pack a lot of lessons into one story, rather
your
than
goals
say,
kind of
here are
sometimes
five
not necessarily
things that you shouldn't do and 5 things you should do, and those, yeah.
It all
That was
varies,
my
right?
thought.
Like what you should, the prescription of things, it varies, and it's all contextual. And what's like so important about growing and learning new skills, right, and applying yourself, and just all the elements of professionalism, and just and taking professionalism out of it, right? Professionalism has an implication that like there's validation when you make something your profession because you're existing within the capitalist. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Don't say anything's professional, but to become an expert in mastering. There it is. That's what I'm looking for. Mastery of something takes a focus on the practices to accomplish the goal, to accomplish the task. Right? It's not following someone else's explicit task, but taking the message and the heart of what they're talking about and what they did, and the power of stories and the way we associate with stories. Man, we are so creative and interpretive, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm going to use the 2001: A Space Odyssey. The legendary smash cut when the ape man throws the bone that he just used to kill another man.
I've never heard
another
this
ape
story
man.
before, but go on.
No, okay.
I'm
Have
joking.
you ever
You've
seen
told me like
2000?
10
Oh,
times. But go on.
oh shit, that's right. I forget who I've told. You
No,
know, it doesn't
go
matter.
on.
You
The
throw it
audience
up,
hasn't
right,
heard
and
it.
it's smash cuts. It's smash cuts, right, when he throws this bone up in the air to a space station, and and they're in the same alignment and all that stuff. And the power, there is nothing explicit. Like they didn't write in full font over this, like pause the movie, pause this film, and say, "Hey, the bone is a weapon, and man has followed the path of violence and destruction, and now this is a nuclear space station, and it's a weapon, and haha." Like it didn't like describe that. There is an element of ambiguity, but it expresses impact, emotion, subtlety. All like it gets across. Like this is the power of the art and storytelling.
Yeah.
We can take so much from this, and we
Right.
can think about it, and we can think about how that applies to ourselves and how it changes how we see the world, right? We think critically about this, and this is why art and English and literature and the appreciation of these things is important in education, because it's not just, oh look, there's a piece of art, and oh now I know what Shakespeare is. It's a way, it's the human story, and it's how we understand, it's a way that we express ourselves, and it's critical to how we express ourselves. It helps us apply ourselves to other things in life in a way that's us, right? When I read about Ursula Le Guin and I read about this idea of like true voyages return, and then I go and see that concept in so many other things, it helps me focus myself. It helps me give direction and grounding, and then also accept the transience of life, right? Like I'm moving through this life and I'm just experiencing it as I'm experiencing it. And it's a language, it's a matter, it's a thing that I'm experiencing.
Yeah.
And it's important when you're looking at stuff like self-help books to not get stuck on the letter, but to think about what the abstract tool is here, or the concept here is, and then how that can be molded and shaped to support you. Because and this is why I don't like self-help stuff, and I like more like meandering memoir style stuff where it just kind of talks about life experiences and stories and someone's takeaways. Sometimes one of some of the most interesting things I read. Nick Offerman, who's Ron Swanson
Yeah.
from Parks and Rec. I read one of his memoirs that he's written, or one of his books, because they're kind of memoir style, where the deer and antelope play. And
Mm.
the book is just about his journey, his road trip during 2020 COVID with his wife,
Mm.
through like the American Southwest, and it's doesn't really have a point, right? But it's stories with anecdotes,
Yeah.
and there's things from that I took away that maybe someone else wouldn't take away. But the point is, when you tell stories, when you are not being prescriptive, literal, and focused on like do X, Y, and Z to achieve stuff,
Yeah.
you're more likely to. It's harder. It's harder to get value out of those things. It's harder to process and come away with something for yourself to work with. But in the long run, you're going to make something more of it. This is in the world of software. Story points is a perfect example of this, right? So story points, and you've heard me rant about this forever, but story points are an abstraction. It's the lazy man's way out of asking hard questions. Instead of me asking you, how does this work? How do we accomplish what we need to accomplish here? What does it mean? Like, I ask you to do this thing. What does it mean to do this thing? Tell me. Let's walk through it. Let me
Yeah.
understand this. I just tell you, give me a point value, and then you tell me a 5. I'm like, oh, okay. And then eventually, when it turns into velocity and time estimations, I completely forego any effort to understand the actual work because I got this shorthand. And I was like, oh, this shorthand's so efficient. It gives me value because it's so efficient. But like, is this efficient, or is this taking a shortcut that
Mhm.
actually doesn't accomplish what you need to accomplish? Because you have no idea. You are just you're accelerating the game of telephone. You have
Yeah.
all this information that you narrow down to this, and then you communicate this to your stakeholders. And your stakeholders have no concept of the nuance of points. They just hear 5 points, 5 days, or whatever, and then they get a little bit of bet out of it. And then all of a sudden, no one has any involvement or any stake in the actual work that's happening, and all they care about is, do I get it when I want it? And when I don't, I'm going to be pissed, and people are going to get fired. And that's just so that's where I'm saying story points is an example of like the self help type stuff, and diet culture especially, where it's
Mm.
like do these steps instead of understand the functional processes involved, right?
Yeah.
Like understand how human physiology works, how calories in and calories out is important,
Right.
and understand that like you can't target loss fat, and you can't like all these things, right? Understand the functions and let that
Yeah.
guide your philosophy, and let that
Yeah.
guide how you approach things instead of trying to find the satisfying easy answer, because that just doesn't exist. The problem though is you have to
Yeah.
have patience with yourself to learn
I don't know. I
and take
mean,
the time to learn.
there's something about human nature, though. I mean, like, there's something about that we want to be able to take a pill for things. We want to be able to, you know, have immediate results now. And so the way you can achieve that is through prescription and say follow
There's an
these steps.
there's industries upon industries that are trying to capitalize on that, and that's
Yeah.
why I have so much issue with like the self help stuff. And I
Yeah.
think this business literature stuff, like the Phoenix Project or whatever, and I use the Phoenix Project because that's like the most salient. And I want to point out I haven't read this shit. All I know is what people tell me, right?
Yeah.
And what people tell me is like, okay, man, whatever. I don't care.
Yeah.
What you told me makes sense, sure. Also, I learned that you've been doing this for 20 years. How have you not learned this before this?
Oh man,
Get-
you know what drove
Um,
me crazy was like,
but they're so similar.
yeah, what was it lean? You know, the whole lean and Six Sigma and all the whatever
Oh,
nonsense.
dude.
That
Dude,
came,
if anyone ever comes up to me and is like, "Hey, have you heard of scaled agile framework? Safe?" I'm leaving the room.
Oh,
I'm
man.
leaving the room. I have no patience for that.
when that stuff was
I barely have patience for Scrum, dude.
when that stuff was buzzing around. So my first job that I had, I can't remember if I've told the story on here or not, but there were some meetings I remember distinctly would go to, and a couple of girls that were on the team would have, so you'd have your notepad, you know, like
Mhm.
everybody brings a notepad to a meeting, pretend you're diligently taking notes. I remember the two women on the team, or girls or women, would have tally marks for buzzwords and name drops.
Oh, I love that. I
And
love that so much.
you'd have this. Oh man, it was brutal. I mean, we'd have, you know, hour and a half long meetings sometimes, once a week, where people were on the phone from Texas. It was
Mhm.
in Iowa City, where I worked. So you'd have people across the country, and they're calling in. I spoke to John Turnbuckle the other day, and it's supposed to be some guy that you're supposed to just know. It's like, oh, he's the VP of, whatever department, and we were talking about synergy and Six Sigma the other day, and it's word salad. They're not saying anything,
dude.
But it drove me crazy because when you like look it up or distill it down to like its fundamentals, like you said, it's all obvious stuff. It's like, yeah, just be more efficient. Don't waste time doing things that you shouldn't.
And it's all contextual too. There's no
right
system that's going to work for everything.
And you're
right?
Be more efficient. That's okay. I mean, that's what I do normally. And so if you just listen to what I want to do for the business.
And that's the technical communication versus that post-World War II accountant management style, right?
Yeah.
And we're in this era for the last 20, 30 years or whatever, right? I think about Jack Donaghy from 30 Rock as just the quintessential example, right?
Yeah.
Of sorry, not quintessential. He is this demographic of people who are who leverage unironically say Lean, Six Sigma, synergies, all this,
the old managerial
right?
class.
It's the old managerial class. Like Jack Donaghy is kind of like that ideal of theirs, sort of. Like he gets lampooned in the show, and he's not the most effective manager, and it's not. I don't know. That's a whole other thing. We could talk about sitcoms at another point. But one of the things about all that is it's this weird. It is a perfect. I have so many thoughts. I'm putting it together. In 20 some odd years since the Agile Manifesto, right? It has been corrupted and misinterpreted and rigidified and sold and bought and sold and bought, and reinterpreted. That you could just call it the King James Agile Manifesto.
I was literally just thinking of that. Yeah.
It's which leads into another topic at another point where it's like,
yeah,
if you read the Bible as it is today, whatever translation, I'm reading Don Quixote, right? And the foreword, Don Quixote was written by a guy named Cervantes, and he's a Spanish dude from the 1500s or late 1500s, early 1600s. He died in 1616 or something like that, I think. And the translator is talking about the challenge of translations and the philosophies of translations and how that affects the messaging and the language, right? Don Quixote was a comedy, a pure comedy where the madman was had no morals to teach, had no nuance. He was just an idiot that was insane, right? Mm-hmm. That was based on the interpretations or the translations of it. Yeah. And then it was a romance. It was a beautiful romance that had that was a lot more serious and a lot more dour and dreary, based on the interpretations, and that evolved over time based on the translations. And now imagine a book that's been translated hundreds of thousands of times, millions of times, maybe. I don't know. I'm not. Anyways, point being, for 2,000 years, less than that, because it was after Jesus and all that stuff. It took decades.
Things were intentionally put out and added back in, and
it's like you got to try to cut down to the core of it at best you can, right? You got to abstract it, look at the stories and the messaging, and try to abstract it best you can. But then also recognize that, where the translator is doing the literal translation word for word and not putting any of their own influence in. Because with Don Quixote in this forward, the translator's talking about how there's a canon of translations that are on the translator takes the philosophical stance of I am not here to. People are not here to read the translation. They are here to read the author. And I am trying to create exactly what the author wrote.
Yeah.
The problem is the author wrote it in Spanish and you're translating it to English.
Right.
And one of the challenges there is you have to, and this author talks about how this translator talks about how as he spent his time coming to terms with the Quixote, as he calls it, he lived in this world. He talked to Don Quixote and Sancho. And he had to find a way to understand these characters, and then also he had to modernize the language. How would they talk today? How would they talk to contemporaries? And then how would I, what is the heart of what they say, not the words of what they say, right? Yeah. And then how do I translate that? Because that's how the message carries through. Because if you translate the literal words, you end up with what you get with modern Christianity and Catholicism, which is kind of messed up, right? it's just another great example. And
Yeah.
this is where people need to take lit courses in high school. Because it doesn't just apply to Shakespeare and the Bible and religion. Well, you can't also you cannot dismiss understanding the nuance of translations and literature, and all that stuff. And because like, oh, it just mostly applies to books and religion. I'm like, that's the world. Like the whole world is built on this stuff.
Yeah.
You need to understand it because the world is not. It is gross and gray and squishy, and everything
Yeah.
bleeds into everything else. You can't imagine things in boxes and compartmentalized like that. But anyways, Agile is a great example of why literary analysis skills are important, because you have to look at the Agile Manifesto, how it's evolved, how it's been bought, sold, and bought and translated, and then kind of throw it away too, right? Like
Yeah.
when someone's telling you self-help, professional literature, Agile, Six Sigma, Lean, Safe, whatever, there's the truth doesn't exist. There's messaging that's fuzzy and blurry, and the truth is the work that's getting done. That's the truth, right?
Yeah.
APIs, databases, UIs.
I think maybe the moral
That's it.
to kind of wrap the rant up. I think
Yeah, thank you.
There's
I'm
maybe
sorry.
more value in abstract, like communicating shapes of things,
Yeah.
rather than giving like the details, or rather than. So one of the things, because I like to draw on martial arts experience, one of the things that kind of happens with, so like the last most recent style that I took, one of the ideas was that you just get in and you do it as best as you can, and you learn. You're overwhelmed at first, but you start to get the shape. Like that's the quickest thing you hold on to, is the shape of something, and not like standing in a certain shape like this, but like the
No, it's multidimensional. It's
right.
It's the flow of energy and the reactions and all these, like,
so it's
as I hit you and
yeah,
all these
it's like an abstract concept. So it's like, in Taekwondo, they might teach you to start a punch at your hip and throw like this, but a certain style of kung fu, like the one I took, a punch like doesn't come from your hip, and your hands come out forward more. So that's what I mean by shape. There's an overall like outline abstraction of like, what do I do with my arms? Well, you don't put them here, you don't hold them like this, you put them out here, and so you learn that shape. You're given the tools, to sort of like hone that shape in with more detail, and a lot of that goes back to what we've discussed before of the action and iteration and feedback loop, and then you have somebody that is skilled in that. So you have like your Michael Jordan, your Bruce Lee, or whoever that can distill different pieces of different points and give you tips, not as a prescriptive manner, but to say, consider this, like refine your shape in this way because of this outcome.
You're communicating as close to the fundamental language, right?
Right.
You're not adding all this industry knowledge,
Right.
right? Like when I talk to try to bring, I think what you're talking about a little bit to like software, when I talk to stakeholders, I don't tell them it's going to take days. I don't tell them it's points. I don't tell them anything. I tell them in the language that you guys talk to me in, as fundamentally as I can, right?
Yeah.
Where you guys tell me we need to build a data warehouse and that needs CRUD functionality or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I'm saying some bullshit, but the point is like there's a fundamental the best way to convey a concept and for it to be effectively useful for someone is to give people, you could talk all the specifics you want, but to try to, and one of the reasons there is this idea of a moral of the story is that it's the shape that fits the largest subsets of data that can then be leveraged because it fits so many subsets, can be leveraged by more people and becomes more applicable.
Yeah.
The more abstract you get to a point, the more valuable it can be. But the more abstract you get, the less specific you have to be.
Right.
Right? And the more open-ended it is. But that becomes valuable in its own way because someone can take this object and shape it for themselves, and it can fit their molds, and then they can grow and learn from it and experience the universe in some cool new way.
Yeah.
With like food, right? Understanding just the fundamental chemistry of food.
Yeah.
And I just finished watching The Bear on Hulu, and on the last episode, the main guy messages his like head chef, who they had a falling out, and he's like over a dish she was trying to get on the menu, and he messages her, and as a start of his apology, basically, he says it needs acid, and it's such a little thing where it's like they communicate at this fundamental level, right? Like if you
Mhm.
understand food, if you understand the fundamentals and you learn from all these different cuisines, and you're speaking not necessarily in, oh, I used, damn it, I'm losing the thread. But the point is, learn the fundamental language
Yeah.
and let that shape the message, and try to talk at that level instead of like I'm not going to go to someone that isn't a software engineer and tell them about Scrum and Agile and use those words. I'm going to abstract it and talk about things in broad strokes.
Yeah. Use a lot of analogies and stuff like that to get the person
Yeah.
hooked. There's yeah, so I brought up Mr. Beast and his YouTube channel before the show, and I'll use him as an example for this topic. So
The dude's incredible in that he can just do like the scale, the scope of the videos that he makes.
yeah. So
That's ridiculous, man.
what he said was so I started watching stuff that about him and about how he accomplishes his success. I still haven't actually I did watch one of his videos. So I think that was actually the first video I saw of his, and that was today. So what I gathered was, and he was smart about this, he, you know, when people are looking for advice, he says, I can't, he basically repeated what we were saying. It's like, I can't give you anything prescriptive because what works for me doesn't work for other people. And you know, there's a lot of people that can try to be me, that can try to copy me, but they won't be me, and they won't have the same success because they're going to be, well, for one thing, they're going to be following behind me. They're going to be one step behind. They're waiting for me to come out with the next thing and copy that. So that doesn't allow you to be innovative and creative because you're copying somebody else. You're not being yourself. You're not putting yourself into this thing. And so to kind of bring it back, he said, you know, I can't give you anything because then millions of people will try it and they'll fail and they'll be mad at me. And so what he said instead was,
I love that.
he starts giving, like we were talking about, abstract concepts. He says, just, you know, go out and do 100 videos. And he says, just try to get better every video. And then people push back. They're like, well, how can you do that? And he's just like, well, you know, one video you work on improving your sound, the next video your lighting, the next video some thumbnail techniques, and you know, there's all sorts of things that you can do. And the other thing is, like, so I looked at it and I was like, he's making a ton of views or getting a ton of views, but also he's doing these outlandish things that are like, you know, spend 100 days in the
But also,
spend 100 days.
it kind of follows that logic though, because like he probably started. I don't know how he started. He just appeared out of nowhere, for in my world at least. But like he probably started with making 100 videos and just figuring out how to do audio and figuring out how to set up his video and figure out how to do handheld cameras and then like trying all these new things. He had an idea, he would go try it with whatever tools he had available to him, and then that by trying. And then we talk about this with like software development. Whenever it's more important to go try to make the thing than to spend all your time thinking about making the thing.
Try to make the thing and then improve upon it. You can't just make it.
Try make it and then fail, right? Like, accept that it's not going to be what you want it to be perfectly or at all, because then you can, by contrast, start to learn, right? Like we talk about failure being the best teacher, and the only time, like one of the things I have to work, we talk about going. Maybe it's a good way to start aiming to wrap things up, but like talking about earlier in the episode when I was talking about how I have these hangups, I'm trying to peel back these layers. One of the layers I'm trying to peel back next is like, well, what if I suck? Right? What if I'm just, you know, I have a friend of mine made a comment once, and it was one of my best friends. He is one of my best friends in the world, and I love him to death. And he didn't say this like meanly. Like he said this is an incredible compliment. Because like it was the first time I ever showed him my art, right?
Yeah.
And he was like, "Holy shit, dude! Why did you make?" At one point in time, I made a food Instagram with my ex. And he's like, "Why did you do that instead of art? Your art isn't like." And my art's whatever. It's fine. I'm not great. I'm not practiced. Whatever. But I was like, I have an emotional connection to both things. But I love making food and I love sharing food and I love that whole thing. Right? There's this whole complex relationship I have with food and the making of it and all these things. And I'm like, one of the things I struggle with is, but what if I'm bad at it? What if I just suck and the stuff I make sucks? And I'm like, well, what's the consequence of people if it's sucking? Is no one's gonna watch it. and am I worried about no one watching it? Because I already suck and no one watches, right? Like
Mm.
I tried making gnocchi the other day. Potato mush. It's just awful. Like I had I had three Nokos. I had three
No go.
little gnocchis that were that held their shape, and like 2 dozen that just melted into mush. And I
Yeah.
learned from it. And I was like, well, what's the difference between this and if I was on camera? And the only thing is that if I was on camera, well, if I was in a kitchen, that's another thing, right? If I was in a kitchen,
Yeah.
I messed up making homemade gnocchi, and that's bad for business. But in terms of learning,
Yeah.
right, in terms of growing, the only difference is that I have some sort of complex about people watching it. And if
Mm.
I care about it, then they will care about it probably.
Yeah.
But if I don't care about being bad and I'm just make the whole point being just I'm learning,
Yeah.
then no one's gonna really care.
But if
That's one of the things I've
on
learned.
the flip side
Sorry,
of that
go
too,
ahead.
like if you do care about,
If you care about failing
but if you do,
so that you can
people won't
Go
care
ahead.
about that, or like you said, if you care about the failing, people care and notice. But on the flip side, if you care and you're compassionate, or not compassionate, but passionate about doing the thing, and if it's to learn and demonstrate learning and show yourself learning on
if you
camera, and also the like passion you have for doing the thing, then people will care about that. So
Mhm.
it works both ways. Where if you're constantly
And
worried about
people
that,
love to like I mean binging with Babish, the YouTube channel. He has biffed it with Babish or something, right? Like basically whole videos that he makes where it's like, yeah, this is a video of me ruining a dish and learning how
yeah,
to do it better.
some channels have bloopers
And
at
I
the
was like,
end, where they constantly like
oh yeah,
mess
like
up,
and everyone loves that stuff.
Yeah.
Like there's a place for that, and it goes back to what you're talking about, where it's the passion
Yeah.
and to make progress, it's you gotta peel back the layers for you. What's your baggage? What are the layers that stop you from doing the thing, and how can you peel those back and make it so that you're able to go do it?
Yeah.
And that's how people like Mr. Beast or whoever are able to get to where they're at. And you shouldn't set any expectation to be Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast is a once in a lifetime kind of guy and a once in a lifetime opportunity, right? Like stuff.
Yeah.
So much of it is luck, but the only way you're gonna fail is if you stop rolling the dice, which is a dangerous thing to say because it sounds like gambling, and I'm not gonna
Let's see.
support gambling. But what I am saying is that in life, you only fail at doing something truly, in my opinion, when you've stopped trying to do it, right?
Well, it's kind of like the hey, did you hear that? I own this stock. Well, oh, did you hear it went down? Oh, you must have lost a lot of money. I don't lose money until I take the money until I, cash in the stock. It's, if you're
Yeah,
investing long
exactly.
term, it's the exact same thing. I'm in it for the long term. I'm gonna expect to make a lot of money in 10 years or so. The ups and downs, I don't really care.
It's part of the deal. Yeah.
Unless it goes bankrupt.
Um,
I will say though, as far as if this is any consolation, if this helps you at all, is human beings are a Schrodinger's cat of suck, and I'll explain. You both
I love
suck
this.
and you
Okay.
don't suck at the same time. Here's an example. If you compare yourself to, let's say, Michael Jordan in his prime, let's say even now, he will destroy you in basketball and you will suck. If you play against a toddler, you will destroy them in basketball and you will suck. So if you're
Yep.
comparing yourself relative to other people, you can always find people that you're probably better or worse than.
Yeah.
So ignore that thought and just do it for yourself, and there's no concept of sucking. End of story.
Yep. Just compare yourself to yourself. At worst, compare yourself to yourself and where you've been.
Yeah.
Because like I like what you said. There's what now 8 billion people on this planet. There's going to be people. That's one of the things too for me. Is like why would I start learning how to cook and start trying to like share that experience and make that a core part of my life when there's millions of other people that are doing just that. It's like, well, it doesn't really matter. Like it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Nothing matters, and it doesn't matter that nothing matters.
Well, there's
So
also
just
people
do the
that
thing.
may like your take on something. So, there have been people in my family that have said, suggested something, and I'm like, somebody's already done that before, and they're like, so, do it your way. Like, you can make
Yeah,
it, and maybe
exactly.
somebody likes the way you do it better than other people. And I've actually thought about it a lot because I've seen, I'll watch, I'll go look at a video that piques my interest, see that it's got 1 million views or something crazy on that, and watch it, and I'm like, it's not an amazing video if you consider the
Mhm.
the like lighting, the sound, all the other aspects other than the actual thing that they're doing, video is not that great. But I know that people are watching it because of either maybe a good thumbnail and or what's going on in the video somebody wants to know about, let's say. And I'm just thinking I could do the same thing in a better package and people would probably enjoy it more, assuming I have the audience. But anyway, I digress.
It's part of, well, I think to put a shape to all of this, it's like you've got to focus on doing the thing. Take step 1. Think of step 1 through 10, but just take step 1. Forget everything else and just take.
That should be the title of this episode.
Do the thing, and find do the thing. Episode whatever. Do the thing.
Yeah.
But Steve, we're an hour and 10 minutes in.
Oh man.
And I don't want to tax my internet anymore because that's how that works.
Sure.
But I think it might be a good point to stop here. But I want to hear a little bit about are there any books you're reading, TV shows you're watching, or any projects you've got going on that you're working on right now?
Well, I watched The Peripheral. I just finished the first season, which is also a book, I think. So that counts for both, in my opinion. It's pretty good. I really liked it a lot. What else? Just continue to make more videos and think more about. I've watched some more videos on lighting. Because I feel like a lot of my videos. So I like the lighting in my workshop. It's very bright. It lets me see, myself doing something fairly well, but it doesn't come across in the videos. I don't feel like. So I'm trying to study up on how to improve that, basically, as a film. So
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Learning.
And that's fun, man. Similar thing for me is I'm working on my audio for these recordings. So we're trying something a little different this time, where we're recording audio in your machine and my machine separately, and then I'm going to go and do some video editing to get it all synced up, and hopefully that comes out okay.
Yeah.
But I've been reading Don Quixote, like I said. It's
Nice.
a big freaking book, massive book. So I'm slowly getting through that. I've also been working through, because I'm one of our coworkers. He hates this because he's the kind of guy that just like reads a book and then reads the next book. I read multiple books at the same time, and I kind of like when one grabs my fancy, I work through it. It's awful, so I'm gonna probably trigger people with this, but I'm reading Don Quixote, but I'm also reading Ancillary Sword, the second book in the Imperial Ratched series by Anne Leckie, and I cannot recommend that enough. I tore through Ancillary Justice. I'm tearing through Ancillary Sword. It's so good. It's so much fun. If you like science fiction, if you like Ursula Le Guin, if you like John Scalzi, this is up your alley. And then I've been getting in shape, continuing to eat and healthy and work on. I've got so there's this guy. Have you ever? We can talk about it later, but the French Brigade, which is a way of organizing the kitchen, a professional kitchen, developed by a guy named Escoffier.
What's it called again?
The French Brigade, Escoffier. I'm Texan. I can't pronounce shit right.
Yeah.
But anyways, Escoffier is the legendary French chef, and I ordered a copy of his book, a cheap copy, because there was like a $400 version of it, which is like, that's not what I want. But anyways, I ordered a copy of one of his books, something culinary, I can't remember. But anyways, I'm working on like just consuming as much knowledge as I can about the history of food and from some of these big authors. But that's kind of what I'm working on, man.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, we'll check in next week, see how we're doing, and we'll see what I next week I want to continue to talk in it. Maybe if it makes sense, but we'll see what we always figure out the topic when we get into it.
Yeah.
We're learning on where we're going, but this has been another episode of Where Do We Go From Here? I've been Tex. This has been Steve. Thank you guys for joining us, and you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Talk to you soon.
See ya.
Goodbye.